Selena were the same. Split right down the center.
Meow.
I'm ready, Max. I've been down here too long. It's time for me to ascend, to re-emerge.
On the second one, there was always the desire to kind of do something else, but still keeping the spirit of Batman. I mean, we wouldn't want to change it to where all of a sudden it was a completely different thing. But, you know, you're working with other writers, designers, actors, artists. You're not, myself included, don't want to just do the same thing. So everything was slightly redesigned or completely redesigned or rethought, but it's always trying to keep within some idea of the Batman that we first made.
Tim and I had talked about it. We figured we had this pretty well wired, you know, what I did, what I didn't do, what I needed to do, what I absolutely didn't need to do, what was better for me not to do. And we thought, well, this will actually be easy. This will be one of those where you just show up, you know, turn around, look into camera, and kind of spray a little sweat on your face like you just beat up 5 guys and go home. It turned out it wasn't like that at all.
It did have a darkness and a complexity and a resonance that I think the audience at the times, a lot of people didn't expect. You know, it wasn't just kind of a fun, cool comic book movie. It was something more than that.
You didn't invite me, so I crashed!
Tim and I had several kind of loose conversations about where the movie would go with input from the studio. They really wanted the Penguin because they sort of saw the Penguin as the number 2 Batman villain. We wanted to do Catwoman, so we wound up doing Penguin and Catwoman. And I did 2 drafts. It was a deal where the studio was now at the point where they wanted to proceed with the movie. And they said, Tim, come on, you gotta do it. You gonna do it or not gonna do it? And Tim was very averse at the end of the day to the idea of coming in and doing a sequel because he thought he'd kind of, you know, look, I've shot my wad on Batman, I've said what I have to say about Batman, I don't really know if I want to do this. And he was very reluctant to get involved. And finally, the way that they kind of got to him was to say, well, what if the second movie is really just a Tim Burton movie? And that kind of got his attention and got him thinking about what he could do with it again. You know, how extreme could you go with the Penguin? How extreme could you go with Catwoman? What if you didn't have to worry about, you know, sort of the fidelity to the mythology, all of that kind of stuff like that?
I wouldn't have done it right after the first one because that was like the last thing you'd want to do was go right into another one of those. So I did Edward Scissorhands after Batman, which was nice, sort of different kind of experience, which was great. But then I was still intrigued by the other characters, you know, like the Catwoman, you know, came to mind right away because that's next to the Joker. That was probably my favorite second villain in the piece. And then that got us to thinking about, well, the Penguin. You know, you could find the psychological profile of Batman, Catwoman, Joker, but the Penguin was just this guy with a cigarette, and a top hat, you know, and didn't really, what is he? So, but then started thinking about, you know, Catwoman, Batman, sort of this animal people, and Penguin, and started to think about him, tried to find a profile for him, and so it was fun to kind of come up with the sort of bad freak, you know, but again, that duality of somebody who's been sort of wronged and you know, has that sort of split not like dark, but sort of human animal, you know, and sort of using the animal motif as a strong image for the film. And then I started to get excited about it.
Well, once we decided, you know, that Tim was going to direct the sequel, you know, we jumped right in with the script. So it was, I mean, it was challenging. It was not an easy screenplay to develop.
Most of the stuff that I had done for that movie wound up being scrapped. And the decision that came out of that was just basically to go with pretty much a whole new direction with the story.
Tim and I never had a conversation about, like, what are fans of the comic book going to think? What are the people going to think? What are the sponsors who, you know, have promotions connected to the movie going to think of this movie? We never had those conversations. We never thought about it. I mean, we were really just about the art. We surprisingly got very little directives from the studio, like you must have, Robin, and there was none of that really. I think we did try it. We did try something, and Tim was big on not making a big deal about it. Like we wanted to work in maybe a Robin character. I could tell he was not enthusiastic about it from the get-go. But we wanted more of a thing where it was kind of like something that would be hinted at and then developed in a later movie.
At some point, there was a discussion of Robin, and again, the only way I could see it was to try and find a profile that worked. But what ended up happening was, again, I think, at the end of it all, we just realized we had too many characters, and you know, people even complain, even without Robin, they complain that there maybe is too many characters, you know, and always with, you know, there was always the idea that the third or fourth, or, you know, I mean, at this point, I think Warner saw it as a potentially ongoing thing, maybe, and therefore, you know, there was always that, well, if we don't do it in this one, they'll do it in the next one kind of deal.
You know, what Tim is able to do is make characters that are mythic. He is able to connect with them on an emotional level and make them real and grounded, so that even though they seem to be, you know, otherworldly or larger than life, their emotions are real and relatable.
More than any other person who's interpreted Batman, that I really think that Tim Burton has the most in common with Batman.
I remember hearing things like, oh, you know, in the first movie, you know, the Joker stole the show, and in the second movie, you know, he's hardly in it, it's all the Catwoman and Penguin, and I always felt that those people, for me, were missing the point of the character of Batman, you know, what he is. That's why I didn't like Robin involved, just because this guy wants to remain as hidden as possible and in the shadows as possible and unrevealing about himself as possible. So, you know, all of those things, you know, he's not going to eat up screen time by these big speeches and doing, you know, dancing around the Batcave, you know. I always felt he was in at the right amount and the right sort of level of him.
Okay, Mark. Okay. And action!
We really wanted Michael Keaton to be Batman and Bruce Wayne again. I mean, you know, it's always hard, I think, for an actor to commit to playing the same character over and over again. They have to feel confident that they have something more to bring, you know, to the character. And, you know, Michael definitely struggled with that and questioned it, which I think was good. You know, it pushed us to really make sure that the character, you know, reached the level of the first movie.
I think Michael was game for it. I think he was probably game for it the same reason I was, which is, you know, he'd done the character and got to kind of revisit it with other actors and other people, other situations. So, you know, I think that was probably the lure for him. I don't think it was the joy of climbing back into the suit, you know, but I think it was for those reasons probably.
The only challenge I thought of before I started it was the mere fact that I had never done to a character twice. So I was interested in doing that. What I hadn't anticipated was, I was into my second or third day, I realized something seemed a little off, and what I think I was doing was imitating myself. You're playing the same character, so I had to keep thinking, well, I played this character, so what does he do here? And I excluded any other possibilities. So once I found myself saying, okay, this seems like what he would do here, but it doesn't sound right and it doesn't feel very right. So I found myself kind of doing an impersonation of myself, which was, first of all, impossible, and second of all, really strange. And so I just dropped that and said, no, you gotta just open up like it's the first time and just trust that, you know, the character will be there, I guess.
It was really fun, you know, casting this movie. What a dream come true to have to cast the Penguin and Catwoman in one movie, you know? And I think everybody always just automatically said, Danny DeVito's the Penguin. Who else is going to be the Penguin?
There was a piece in the paper. Somebody said, wouldn't it be cool if Danny played the Penguin?